Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law once again. I hope you're having a great day. So, in personal news, I have gotten a new iPhone. I had the iPhone SE second generation for quite a long time, and it had two kind of problems with it. One was the battery life was no longer very good because the battery had been, charged and discharged so many times that according to the built-in battery monitor, its health was at 78% or something. So one problem was the battery life was, not as good as it could have been because the battery had just been depleted all hell. And perhaps even more of a problem was the lightning port for the iPhone SE it was stopped working. Basically, you had to put it in just so, right? It would only work if it was just so. So basically, the port had become loose, and I tried, blowing it out with air and stuff like that to see if it was lint, which it wasn't. The port just basically had become worn, basically by inserting the cable and removing it, inserting it, removing, insert, removing it, just become worn. And so basically, you couldn't charge it using the port anymore. You could charge it using the magnet on the back, but you couldn't charge it using the port. And the magnet on the back couldn't accept power fast enough from my car to work with maps. So I could use Maps on my phone, but the charger couldn't deliver power fast enough to compete with the drain. So even in my car, when it was on the mag thing, it would still lose power. I mean, it wouldn't lose it, super fast, but it would still lose it. And that's not good because your phone winds up more depleted than when you started, which is not really great. So many, many combinations of problems. Now, the cost to repair that port, at least if you're doing it from Apple, is so expensive that it doesn't make any sense to repair it. Now, you could get it done by some third party company, but even then, once you're replacing the battery and once you're replacing that port, you're spending so much money relative to the value of the phone, particularly used. It doesn't really make sense anymore. And I personally was going to be happy just sticking with the phone I had indefinitely, but my dad insisted. And I was like, I don't want to because it's so expensive. And he's like, I insist, basically. And he said it like a couple days ago. And this morning, he's basically, I'm buying you a new phone today. And I'm like, okay. So we went to the Apple store and we got a new iPhone X 16, the basic 16, not the Plus, not the Pro, not the E, but we got the basic 16. And this is my first one without a thumb button on it. So that's going to take some getting used to not having the thumb button on there. So I'm going to have to figure out how to use the phone and all that stuff. But you know, all the rest of it. Could I have reached out to Rossman? I suppose I could have for those things, but I don't necessarily like to just do it necessarily as a favor. I mean, I could have, but he's in Austin. I could have shipped my phone to Austin and have it shipped back, but it wasn't worth the hassle. It wasn't worth the hassle, at least in my opinion. But whatever. And my dad was insistent, so he's like, use the phone all the time, which is true. I use it constantly, and you even use it for streaming sometimes, which is true. I'm like, okay, so fine, you can buy me a new phone 16. And I got the 16 rather than the E because the 16 has, for its photographs, it allows for macro photographs, which the 16 doesn't, even though as far as I can tell, they have the same lens. So it should, but it's not in the software, which I assume is a deliberate choice by Apple. So the nice thing with the 16 as opposed to the 16E is you can take macro photographs. So you can take really up-close photographs, which is nice because I've had to do that occasionally and get really blurry results, even with my watches and stuff when I was taking photographs, and now I can get much better close-up shots. So that's nice and that's exciting. So that's fun. Yeah, I'm using the phone built-in mic right now. So all those things. So I have to figure out how to use the new, and no, the phone was old. It's the second gen. So, it's 2 years old. So it's kind of time to upgrade it anyway, right? It's between all these factors, the battery life is kind of bad. The port's no longer working. It's 2 years old. It's kind of time for an upgrade anyway. So it's like, okay, I guess we'll put all this if they had come out with the iPhone SE 4th gen, which is what I was expecting them to do, I would have just gotten the iPhone SE 4th gen. But they didn't do that. The 4th gen was great, or the 3rd gen was great, and the 2nd gen was great because they were like $429 for a brand new phone. It was great. It's like you get $429 for a brand new phone. It was fantastic. Now they don't do that anymore. Now they just have the E. And the E's like $599 as opposed to like $429. And you don't get the macro lens. So it's like, eh. So all those things. So I have a new phone. So that's exciting. And now it's USB-C. And it will charge faster. And many of my problems are solved. And that's exciting. All right. So that was my personal story for today. And then in terms of Karen Reed today, I watched parts of the hearing. I watched parts of the hearing, and it was very fiery today, as I'm sure many of you noticed. The judge yelled a lot at the defense, saying that they had deliberately, intentionally, they had, basically maliciously, they had, she basically used every adjective that one could say to say that the defense was behaving in a reprehensible passion. You're deliberate, you're intentional, you're misleading, you're acting like scoundrels. I mean, basically, she used every adjective in the book to say that she thought the defense was deliberately lying to her. And then she didn't really do anything about it, which was weird. She said, you've been lying to me about these ARCA experts. You've been doing it in a material way. It was deliberate, intentional, and flagrant. She used the word flagrant. It's like, and then she's like, and then she had a private discussion with just the defense and the defendant at the sidebar. So the Commonwealth was not included in this ex parte sidebar. We had a little discussion just with the defense and the defendant, wherein apparently Miss Reed expressed, unsurprisingly, her desire that her lawyers continue to represent her. And yes, she'd like the ARCA experts, if you don't mind very much. It's like, okay, I mean, that's fair enough as far as it goes. But like the judge's words don't match her actions, right? And if the judge really believed that, this was flagrant, material, intentional, deliberate, and, basically everything else, if they really believed that, then why they're not sanctioning the party is beyond me. Now, the real politique reason that she's not doing it is because if she said, I'm kicking, one of the attorneys off the case, or if I'm not going to allow ARCA to testify, if she had done that, she obviously is inviting more review of her decisions later on by an appellate court. Those are big boy and big girl decisions. And it's not to say a judge shouldn't do it, but it is to say that the real politique reason is because if I do that, I know the Court of Appeals is probably going to look at this case with an increased level of scrutiny to make sure that my findings were really solid and I was able to do that, right? And so it's like, that's sort of the real politique reason, because otherwise it makes no sense. She didn't even fine them. She didn't even assess cost. Like, I'm going to fine you $1,000 or something just to try to make a point. She didn't even do that. She's just like, I'm not going to, it's flagrant, it's intentional, it's deliberate, you've been lying, you've been misleading, candor, all this, and then I'm not going to do anything about it. It's a really, really weird thing. It's a really, really weird thing to me that doesn't make any sense. So it's like either the judge doesn't really believe what she's saying, which, that's a strong possibility. The judge doesn't really believe what she's saying, or she's being a chicken. Basically, are the two possibilities. She really doesn't believe what she's saying, or she's being a chicken because she doesn't want to make the decision that would flow naturally from all those findings. And so that's really weird. And incidentally, she said, during the hearing, she said at one point, oh, the defendant has their choice of lawyer. I'm like, well, strictly speaking, that's not even true. Strictly speaking, that's not even true. It's like, as long as we want to be technically correct as the best kind of correct, the defendant is entitled to a lawyer. The defendant is entitled to a lawyer, and there are any number of cases, including from the U.S. Supreme Court, where lawyers have been removed for, various reasons, and the Supreme Court, at least in those cases with respect to those particular lawyers and their particular facts, so it's a bit fact-specific, But even the U.S. Supreme Court has said, like, yeah, that's good, right? Remove that lawyer. That lawyer goes, gets kicked off. That witness isn't allowed to testify. That witness can't testify as to this or whatever, right? So those kinds of sanctions are possible because a person's entitled to a lawyer, but not necessarily their particular choice of lawyer, right? And if your lawyer F's around and finds out and gets booted off the case, yeah, go hire somebody else. But I want them. Too bad, so sad, find somebody else. And assuming all the prerequisites are there, the judge can do that. And so the fact the judge didn't do that, again, kind of suggests she didn't really believe what she was saying. And this whole thing is theatrical, which, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like I'm trying to put the fear of God into you, but it didn't really flow from what she was saying. And so it just confused me. Like I even had said previously, it seemed to me like she was setting up excluding the ARCA experts. That seemed to be where it was going. We're going to exclude the ARCA experts. And she didn't do that. And then she said to the prosecution, well, you're entitled to a full cross. Like you weren't entitled to that anyway. It's like you have the right to a full cross-examination. Thanks, Your Honor. Thanks for telling me, something I already knew, but thanks for clarifying that. I suppose she's maybe trying to suggest, like, imply, like, a line of questioning that she wants or something, but, like, the whole thing was just weird and bizarre and didn't make any sense to me, and I didn't get it. So the whole thing is just, like, it's weird. It's just weird, and nothing makes any sense. And then, of course, there was the issue of excluding particular witnesses from the courtroom after they testified, which normally you don't necessarily do unless they're subject to recall. So normally, like, keeping witnesses out of the courtroom before they testify is correct. That's segregating the witnesses, right, to prevent them from hearing each other's testimony. That's perfectly normal. But typically, once a witness is no longer subject to recall, there's no reason to exclude them. If they want to sit in the courtroom, they can, because they're just now a member of the public, right? So typically that's the rule. But of course, like any member of the public, right, now they're just a member of the public sitting in the courtroom. And the judge has the right to kick out any member of the public. Again, the right of the public to observe the trial is not the same thing as any particular person's ability to observe the trial. Those are not the same thing. So judges can kick out individual people as long as they allow the public in general to participate, right? That's sort of the thing. Because the right is more collective, not individual. And so, the prosecution was talking about, well, it's a time-honored tradition for witnesses to watch the close. Is it? Is it a time-honored tradition? I missed out on that. It's not normal. Most of the time, the witnesses go. They leave the courtroom, and you never hear from them again. They're somewhere in the wind. So it's like, it's a time-honored tradition for witnesses to watch the close. Really? What courtrooms are you in? This is a time-honored tradition for witnesses to watch the close? I thought it was a time-honored tradition for the witnesses to scamper off and never be heard of ever again. I thought that was the time-honored tradition. But maybe it's a different memo up there. I don't know. But it was a really weird thing to say. And then the judge, of course, didn't make a decision because she doesn't make decisions from the bench because she doesn't roll that way. She's like, well, I'll look at it again and I'll think about it. It's like, okay, I guess. I mean, to me, it seems like a fairly big, it feels like a no-brainer decision to me, because it's like, okay, I'm kicking out, the Alberts and, whomever. I'm kicking out these people. And it's like, well, the defense thinks it's prejudicial to them. And I'm kicking these people out who have no real right to be there in the first place. So, and of course, if they want the time-honored tradition of watching the close, they can watch it on TV like the rest of us. So you got that going on for you too. So it seems like a fairly no-brain decision, but I guess she's going to think about it some more because I don't know reasons and stuff. I don't really know, but that's what we're doing, I guess. So exciting. So those were the thoughts about the hearing today. Unsurprisingly, of course, that she was yelling at the defense a lot, because that's what she does, and not surprising that, she doesn't want to grant what the defense wants. Also, incidentally, by the way, just as a finding of fact for the question about, like, whether or not the defense has, in fact, been misleading and lying and not candor and, all those things. I don't personally see it. I don't personally believe those things to be true. It's possible the defense maybe was not as clear as they could have been, but I've personally found their explanation to be very satisfactory. I found their explanation to be satisfactory. I found their clarification to be satisfactory. And I don't think it quite reached into the territory of deliberate, purposeful, intentional, all that stuff. I don't really find the underlying stuff. But the judge, of course, does because, well, the defense can do nothing right and the prosecution can do no wrong, and that's how they roll. So exciting and fun. It's true other lawyers can reference to this and say you've been misleading to courts before. Not before the jury, they can't. Not before the jury, but to the extent that that's been true in other courts, that other courts have found that would be relevant because it shows, so if you've been sanctioned by some other court for, being misleading, you wouldn't say that to the jury, but you might say that to the judge. It's like, well, as you're trying to decide whether or not this person's being misleading, let me please take note that they've, been misleading in the past. And again, the rules of evidence are the rules of evidence for trial, not the rules of evidence for all purposes. So I could definitely say, like, you've been misleading to other judges and let me provide this finding for you as part of the factor because it's different. The rules of evidence don't apply unless we're in trial. And so, I think that's fair game. I think that's fair game. So, and then also the judge said something about like the prosecution could have a curative instruction. Curing what is beyond me. The jury hasn't even been impaneled yet. They haven't heard any testimony. What are we trying to cure? A curative instruction? What are we even doing here? It's like, okay, and maybe we're gonna change the jury instructions in some way. I don't even know what we're talking about, but I guess that's more exciting things we're talking about for some reason. I don't know. The whole thing is really weird. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's what we're doing. So all the rest of it. Yeah, the trial here is insane. Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing is insane. I mean, I think that the decision to kick off the lawyer, I think would have been easier. The decision to exclude ARCA, that's a big girl, big pants decision time. And it's like you better be pretty sure as the judge. And it also wouldn't hurt, incidentally, by the way, if you have had prior things where you've been escalating sanctions, right? To jump to such an extreme sanction as a first step is sort of dangerous territory. You want to sort of escalate up there. So that's sort of a big boy, big girl decision. And maybe Aunt Bev was just too scared in the end. Who knows? But the whole thing was weird. Yeah, they tried to pin Jackson on the lead attorney thing. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I was like, yeah, we don't really think of it that way. It's like, okay, cool. It's like, great. We don't really have a lead attorney. You don't necessarily need to have one. It's like, yeah, we don't really think of it in those terms. It's like, okay, fair enough. Cool. Some states or some rules might require it, but apparently it's not required in Massachusetts. So it's like, well, we didn't designate one. Cool. Fair enough. Yeah. She wants to assign extra blame? Yeah. I don't know what that is about. I don't know what that's all about. Also, strictly speaking, since he's pro hoc vice, I'm not even sure, like, from first principles, that he could really be lead attorney. It would almost have to be Unetti. Because Unetti's the only one with bar membership. Right? So, and everyone else is just riding on Unetti's license. So, if there is a lead attorney, it can only be Unetti. Because Unetti's the only one with a license. So, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for Jackson to be a lead attorney. That doesn't make any sense. Because necessarily in pro hoc, the pro hoc is under the supervision of the other attorney. That's in the nature of pro hoc vice, right? So how can I be under their supervision and I'm also the lead attorney over them at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. So if there is a lead attorney, it must be Unetti. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Is there a distinction in any rule about being a lead attorney? Apparently not in Massachusetts, there's not. Apparently not in Massachusetts. There's not about being a lead attorney. So the only other time you might have like a lead attorney might be potentially like if you had multiple different defendants with multiple different attorneys at the same trial. You might like have one of them be like the lead attorney for the defense as the whole. I've seen that kind of done before to help streamline some things, but it's like apparently the rules don't require it, so why are we going to designate one? It doesn't make any sense. So the whole thing is weird. So yeah, so much slush. Yeah, gorgeous house. Yeah, this is my parents' house. They have like an exposed. They have an exposed wood roof, so you can see the roof from the inside. It's all exposed wood, and it's really really nice. And when it gets warm, you can smell the wood, and it's really nice. I like the way it's designed in here very much. So it's like that's the roof, and then of course on the other side of the roof there are shingles and stuff. But it's like that is the roof, so you can actually just see the roof, and that's pretty cool. I like that. I think it's cool. It's all exposed, so I like that look. It's very very natural. It's very nice. Yeah. Oh, and then I also wanted to talk about more. I wanted to talk about the issue of this uh, conversion therapy case that the U.S. Supreme Court took up out of Colorado. So, just to remind ourselves on the fact pattern, Colorado passed a law that for a licensed therapist who does talk therapy, if a person under the age of 18 comes in the door and says, I'm feeling LGBTQ, that therapist is not permitted to disaffirm that belief or that feeling. So the therapist is permitted to encourage it. They're permitted to support it. They're permitted to further it, but they're not permitted to discourage it. They're not permitted to undermine it. They're not permitted to do anything to disaffirm it, right, basically. And this is true even though in the fact pattern of the case, the youth themselves want it, which is a bit of an interesting twist. And whether or not that's true, in fact, but that's the fact pattern as it's been presented to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we're assuming it's true. We're assuming it's true. So in this particular case, these are LGBTQ youth who believe their desires are wrong. This woman who's a therapist is a Christian. And so ostensibly, one of the reasons they've chosen her is because they believe their desires are sinful and they'd like to receive therapy from this therapist to help them not have those desires, suppress those desires, or have more straight desires. And that's apparently what they believe. But Colorado law doesn't turn on what the patient wants. And nor, incidentally, should it necessarily turn on what the patient wants. Because, if I went into the doctor and said, I don't feel like I should have my right arm, because some people feel that way, right? Some people feel like they shouldn't have their leg or they shouldn't have their arm. They feel like it's unnatural and they would like to have it removed, right? And there are people like that. There are people who genuinely believe that. The practice of medicine would say that, for example, it'd be wrong to encourage that. It'd be wrong to promote that. It'd be wrong to accept that, right? So just because the patient wants it doesn't necessarily mean it's a valid medical practice. So I'm not sure it really turns on that issue. What it seems to turn on instead is the question of whether this is medicine at its core or whether or not this is speech at its core. Okay? This is talk therapy. So there's that, right? In this particular type of treatment, we're only talking. It's all speech. Okay. So it seems to turn on this question of, is this medicine or is this speech? If it's medicine, then Colorado can have its law. If it's speech, they can't. And as I've sort of commented before, this would be equally true the other way around. So one of the things that really made me think about this was trying to flip it on its head, which is always a really good way of thinking about things. Like trying to make sure you really believe something is like trying to flip it on its head and still if you still believe it. Okay, so it's like, okay, imagine some state, let's say Alabama. Let's say Alabama passes the opposite law. Let's say Alabama says if it's a person under the age of 18 and they come into the doctor's office and say I'm LGBTQ, Alabama says you can't encourage it. You can't further it, you can't encourage it, you can't do any of those things. You can discourage it, but you can't encourage it. Basically, you flip the law on its head. You flip the law on its head, right? Colorado says you can't discourage it. Suppose Alabama says you can't encourage it, right? The same thing, right? It either is the practice of medicine, in which case Alabama can do it, and even though its answer is different than Colorado, they're both right. They're both right, because what is the practice of medicine is fundamentally decided at the state level. That's within the state sovereign power. What is the practice of medicine? In the same way, incidentally, or comparably, to the question of abortion, right? Is abortion the practice of medicine? Is it valid medicine? Some states say no. Some states say yes. Some states are somewhere in between, right? And they're all right. They're all simultaneously correct because they're making a decision that's within the confines of medicine. They're sovereign, and so they're all simultaneously correct, right? They're all simultaneously correct. From a legal posture, they're all simultaneously correct. And that's just part of, having 50 separate sovereigns, because every state is sovereign. And what it means to be sovereign is you get to decide, and you get to decide no matter which way you go. And so every single state is simultaneously right, no matter how much they differ, because it's within their power, right? If it's freedom of speech, then neither state would be right. Alabama, in this hypothetical, which said you can't affirm it, would be equally wrong to Colorado, because in both cases they're limiting speech, right? In both cases it's talk therapy. In both cases they're limiting speech. If it's First Amendment, in both cases they're limiting speech. So in that situation, both states would be wrong. So that would mean that a therapist in Colorado would be able to, with respect to the LGBTQ youth, that therapist would be able to say, I encourage it or I discourage it. And in Alabama, the therapist would be able to say, I encourage it or I discourage it, because it's a freedom of speech issue and the state can't regulate that because it's speech. All right. So that was sort of the dilemma, right? That was sort of the dilemma. Either they're both right or they're both wrong. And after thinking about this all the way through, or at least trying to, because I've been debating this in my mind for at least a week and probably like 10 days, I've been really thinking this through and really trying to puzzle it out from first principles. After really thinking this out, I think the best answer, on balance, is that it's medicine. And therefore, Colorado's law is valid. And I think that that's the conservative answer, which is really interesting, because then I have to sort of justify that conclusion from conservative principles. It's like, because Colorado obviously passed the law because it was obviously passed by liberals and progressives, right? That was who passed it. And they did it because, we love LGBT. We love them. We don't want to make them feel sad. Like, their motivations for passing it are definitely progressive. They're definitely left-leaning. And so then it becomes really interesting for me as a person on the right to say, well, I think you can do that. It's like, and it's really interesting because it's not the answer you would expect, but it all comes from fundamentally conservative principles, which is interesting. It's like, it's just following the logic all the way through. It's like, well, conservatives believe in federalism. That's one of the things they believe. They believe, for example, states have all power except that power which is given to the federal government. So in the beginning, the state is sovereign, and the state can do no wrong. Each individual state is sovereign, and each individual state can do no wrong. And then they gave some of that power to the federal government in the Constitution, but it's limited. It's a group of enumerated powers. So unless there's a constitutional hook, the state is sovereign and the state can do no wrong. And it's like, well, I think it's the practice of medicine, because even though it's speech with a therapeutic purpose. It's speech intended, designed to create a medical change. We're not administering the drug. We're not injecting you with the shots. We're not giving you the pill. The form of the medicine is speech. But that's the thing. Like the form of the medicine is speech. So even though it's all speech, the speech is still incidental to the medical purpose, which is really interesting, right? It's really interesting because the speech is designed, intended to facilitate the medical end. Its objective is medical in nature, and so the speech is merely incidental to the medical purpose. Even though it's all speech, it's still incidental, which is really, really interesting. And incidentally, by the way, this sort of concept isn't unique to this medical thing, because you could do the same thing with the practice of law, right? The same thing with the practice of law, right? The lawyer uses speech and writing. It's what we do. But the speech, in some sense, is not the thing. It is not the pipe. It is incidental, in some sense, to the affectation of the legal end. And so that's one of the reasons, by the way, for example, that even though law, as a lawyer, is like, when you boil it down, being a lawyer is basically speech at its core. I'm either talking to the client, I'm talking to the court, I'm writing a memo, right? It's like, at the core of what lawyers are, it's speech. It's almost pure speech when you sort of boil it down to its essence. But even though it's pure speech, we still have the concept of it being the unlicensed practice of law for someone who's not a lawyer to do it, even though it's speech, right? The person who's not the lawyer can't engage in the unauthorized practice of law, even though it's all speech, because the speech is incidental to the legal purpose. It's not sort of free speech that's just floating. It's with a particular idea in mind that can be regulated in terms of what the things. So, using these various analogies, like thinking about how we regulate the practice of law, for example, thinking about how we regulate other things, it's like, I think, on balance, it's medical in its nature. And if it's medical in its nature, that means that the state can pass a law that forbids it, because the state is sovereign. And whether or not they came about that because, the legislature did it, or versus some, medical board that they have, right? The medical board that typically licenses doctors, is the government. It's the government. And you can sue the medical board as the government if they, don't do things the right way. If they don't grant you a license, because they acted arbitrarily, you can sue the medical board and you can win, because the medical board is the government. If they just stripped someone of their license because, they wanted to, because whatever reason, you could sue the medical board and win. So the medical board is the government. Even if it's a group of doctors, it's the government. And so it doesn't really matter if it's a group of doctors, and it doesn't really matter if it's the state legislature, because it's all still just the government. So it's like, either way, I think that they can do it. And so that's what I think from conservative principles. And I can already foresee myself becoming extremely frustrated in the future, because while I think this is correct under conservative principles, I think this is conservative, the end result is, the hippie progressives win. And I think that, with their, reprehensible stupid, the hippie progressives with their reprehensible stupid win, and I can't stop it. And so it's very frustrating because I'm saying the hippie progressives with their stupid win and they're right. And then people will attack me for not being a real conservative, even though the reasons I think they're right, I think are as core conservative as you can possibly be. It's just that, on this particular occasion, the principles, at least in my mind, the principles, when you follow them all the way through, without passion or prejudice, when you follow them all the way through with its logic, it's like, well, you're right, even though you're dirty hippies and you suck balls. And so, yeah, that's what I think, and I'm looking forward to more fights with my fellow conservatives in the future. Subject, obviously, to change. Subject to change if someone can convince me that this really is a freedom of speech issue. Of course, if it really is a freedom of speech issue, then Colorado can't stop it either way, and neither can Alabama. So if it really is a freedom of speech issue, that means that, yes, this therapist can do the conversion therapy, but another therapist can encourage it, and the same thing would be exactly true in Alabama, because that would mean that Alabama couldn't pass a law that would say you can't encourage it. That would be equally invalid. So it's like it's got to swing both ways. So I think the better perspective. I think the better perspective is each state can do this as the practice of medicine. One state can forbid it, the other state can allow it, and vice versa. And then we just have 50 state sovereigns, and we move forward with our life in the laboratory of democracy, and so forth and so on. And I fight the conservatives on YouTube about why it's a good thing that the Supreme Court is upholding the Colorado law. That's going to be exciting. Why is it good from conservative principles they're upholding the Colorado law? That's part of the fun and excitement that I'm looking forward to in my life. So all those things. So I've been ranting for a while. Anyone have any thoughts, comments, critique, other than, you're just stupid? If people start traveling over state lines, does it become more interstate commerce? Well, whether or not the federal government could, you're asking a slightly different question. So the fact is interstate commerce could potentially give the authority of the federal government to pass a law. So if you're thinking, could Congress pass a law that says, that speaks to this because it's interstate commerce? They might be able to, right? So whether or not Congress can pass a law that would interfere with this in some way because it's interstate commerce, the answer is maybe. But of course, Congress actually has to pass the law, right? So the mere fact it's interstate commerce doesn't change anything unless Congress decides to, using that authority, change the law in some way. So unless the Congress passes the, affirming the LGBTQ Youth Act, unless Congress passes that law, it doesn't really matter. And then if Congress does pass that law, we can talk about some issues relating to interstate commerce and whether or not they can do that under interstate commerce theory. But until that, happens, it's sort of a moot point. So for the moment, it's a moot point in terms of that. So that's what I think about that. Yeah. And incidentally, by the way, I would question their ability to regulate it under interstate commerce for the exact same reasons, incidentally, that I would question the ability of Congress to pass a law with respect to abortion under interstate commerce. Because incidentally, by the way, if they can, that goes both ways too. So if Congress can pass a law that regulates abortion because of interstate commerce, then they get to choose. And they get to choose either way. See, that's the thing, right? You have to remember this goes both ways. So if Congress can pass a law relating to abortion, presumably they'd be able to say, no abortions for anybody, or abortion's for everybody, right? And either way, like the state would be preempted because of Congress's choice, right? So Congress having the power to do it means the states are preempted, and also means that now every state has to do abortion or not do abortion, depending on which way the law is passed, right? And so, but I will say this: traditionally medicine is considered the state level domain. This is clear, and if you take, for example, the Prince decision dealing with guns in school zones, um, it's clear that there are some limits to interstate commerce, whatever they might be. And so I don't think that Congress can merely regulate it because of interstate commerce. I don't think they necessarily can do that. And I'm not sure they should be able to do that. But then again, I fundamentally question Wickard v. Filburn. You know that, right? So I'm being very consistent with that because I don't think Wickard v. Filburn should be the law. So if you're asking me personally, it's like, I don't really think they should be able to reach into a purely state level issue, despite the fact it's interstate commerce. But, Wickard v. Filburn, unfortunately, is still the law, so I don't get my wishes today, and that's sad. But that's the thing. Do I realize there's a fan above me? I do realize there's a fan above me. It is my hat. Do you like my hat? I like my hat. The hat is nice. I like my fan hat. Fan hat is best hat. So yes, the fan keeps me cool. It is glorious. Yeah, the fan is glorious. Fan is glorious hat. And it fits me. Which is unusual for hat. Thought it was my halo? It might be that too. Is that the only fan? Certainly. Yeah, this is some hot only fan action right over here. This is the only fan on Civil Stream. Yeah, this is the only fan on Civil Stream that you've been wanting / dreading. Welcome to this hot only fan uncivil content. Exciting. And no house tour today, maybe another time. How can you decide which worms affirm their orientation? Well, I mean, that's fact specific. That can be determined from the facts used. That's just a fact specific question. Whether they're words of affirmation, I mean, you just look at the transcript basically, or whatever it is you have, and try to figure out whether or not those are words that count. I mean, that's just a fact specific application. That's not that hard. That's easy enough to do. All right, guys, I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. I don't really have much more to say right now. But yeah, how long am I going to be there? I'm going to come back on Monday. So it's Tuesday today, so another 6 days. I've been enjoying it. I have to tell you what, man, it's nice. The mountain air up here is nice. It feels cleaner. Just feels more, the sun is shining. I'm enjoying being with my parents. All that good stuff. So, yeah. It's my mom's birthday, incidentally, today, so we're going out for her birthday. I'm taking her out today. Happy birthday, Mom. Thank you for giving birth to me, and thank you to the woman who gave birth to you. That was very nice. So I'm looking forward to. How's my mother doing? My mother's doing fine. Her blood pressure medicine, she seems to found something that is mostly working. So they're trying to tweak it a little, but she's found something that seems to be working for the most part. So that's fine. Thank you for asking. Yeah. Normally supposed to be a bad camera angle. It's just good because I'm that beautiful. or becoming that beautiful, one of the two. It'll be interesting when I get back home to see how much more weight I've lost on the scale, because obviously I don't have my scale with me, so it'll be interesting when I get back to see, if I'm down another 10 pounds or something over the time. That'd be cool. So, thank you for saying I look good. I appreciate that. Yeah. I feel good. I feel pretty good today. I feel good. I had my Monjurno this morning. Well, technically it was Zepbound, which is the same drug. It's all triceptide to me. So today I took my Zepbound. So another week worth of that to use. So, yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now, and we'll talk to you some more later. Let me know what other subjects are on your mind. I'm enjoying these more sort of casual, just kind of stream of consciousness streams. I hope you guys are enjoying them too. I've been enjoying the stream of consciousness streams, or just kind of like, let me talk about a subject and just kind of lay out my thinking in a more stream of consciousness way. It's been very rewarding intellectually, incidentally. It's been fun. So, yeah. Do I have any nausea with the Zepbound? No, I had nausea with semaglutide, Wegovy, which is semaglutide. I had nausea with that. So I was using initially like the semaglutide, and I had nausea, but I haven't had any nausea with the triceptide. The only real symptom that there is to speak of is some feeling of dehydration, but it's very tolerable. And I just drink more water to solve that problem. So other than feeling a bit dehydrated, and it's just like, well, drink more water, then to solve that problem. Other than that, I've really had no side effects. So it's been about as close to a perfect drug for me so far as one could hope for. So let's hope that continues to be true. It's been incredibly effective and basically had no side effects. So yeah, that's basically a perfect drug. So the perfect drug so far is working fantastically. It kicks ass. And I hope it continues to be true. Who knows how long the drug will continue to work? Maybe it will stop working at some point. Who knows? But until that happens, man, I'm going to take this ride for all it offers, man. I'm going to take this ride and just take it to the wall. As long as it keeps working, man, I'm just going to power through, man, and just try to lose as much weight as I can while I still can lose weight with it. So as long as the perfect drug continues being perfect, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. We'll see how long it lasts. Hopefully it'll last for a while. We'll see. I've been Uncivil Law, man. Until later, I hope all's well. Cheers for now, my friends, and goodbye.